Now what we left with? Fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. For that we required some space, that's what I am removing this half. So finally we have to discuss about the fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus. Together we will discuss, right? That tract we can also call as tract of Gall and tract of Burdach. Tract of Gall and tract of Burdach. We will take the same picture here. So here I am taking the cerebral hemisphere. We have drawn the schematic view of brain and spinal cord. Now we will draw the same structures here. First order neuron will be present in the dorsal spinal ganglion or posterior root ganglion. So this is the dorsal root ganglion and here is anterior root. These two roots are united and forms the spinal nerve. That spinal nerve will be divided into posterior primary rami and anterior primary rami. Here also same. Now we should know these two tracts, that means fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus, carrying which sensation? Fine touch, tactile discrimination, tactile localization, conscious kinesthetic sensation, proprioception. These sensations will be carried by the posterior column fibers. That means fibers which are present in the posterior white fasciculus. So for the fine touch, what are the receptors? Merkel's discs. They will be like this. These are Merkel's discs. Meissner's corpuscles. They will be like this. For the touch, these two are the receptors. For the proprioception, we know that there will be muscle spindle, Golgi tendon apparatus and other receptors which are present over the joints. So if these receptors are stimulated, that stimulus will be converted into the electrical impulses. That electrical impulses will be carried by the first order neurons which are present in the posterior root ganglion or dorsal root ganglion. So here peripheral processes are there. Touch receptors, proprioceptive receptors are stimulated. That stimulus will be converted into the electrical impulses. That electrical impulses will be carried through the peripheral processes of pseudo unipolar cells which are present in the dorsal root ganglion. Then same impulses will be passing through the central process and they reaches to the posterior horn of spinal cord. This tract is fasciculus cuneatus because it is taking the sensations from the upper part of the body and upper limbs. And if you take the other one, fasciculus gracilis, receptors are same and the process is also same. Peripheral processes of dorsal root ganglionic cells. From here central process will be arising. This central process will be passing through the dorsal root and they reaches to the posterior horn. For these two tracts, first order neurons are present in the dorsal root ganglion. For remaining all tracts, second order neurons are present in the posterior horn. But here marginal nucleus engaged, substantia gelatinosa already engaged, nucleus proprius engaged, dorsal nucleus of clock engaged. Because of that, this central processes of first order neuron itself ascends upward in the posterior white matter. They ascends upward in the posterior white fasciculus. Then here same. They reaches here, they couldn't found any nucleus. Then they ascends upward in the posterior white fasciculus. They ascends upward like this. Then they are reaching to the medulla oblongata. They reaches to medulla oblongata. You must be studied in the posterior part of the medulla oblongata. You can see the two elevations, gracilis tubercle and cuneate tubercle. Deep to the gracilis tubercle and cuneate tubercle, you can find the two nuclei. Those nuclei what we call gracilis nucleus and cuneate nucleus. So here you can see the nucleus. This nucleus what we call gracilis nucleus. Here you can find the one more nucleus. This nucleus what we call cuneate nucleus. This is gracilis nucleus, this is cuneate nucleus. Within the gracilis nucleus, first order neurons will be terminated or relayed. Within the cuneate nucleus, first order neurons are relayed or terminated. Now from here, second order neurons will start where within the medulla oblongata. But in case of remaining tracts, second order neurons are present in the spinal cord level itself. But in case of dorsal column fibers or fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus, first order neurons only ascends upward till medulla oblongata. When they reaches to the medulla oblongata, they found the nucleus. Medially gracilis nucleus, laterally cuneate nucleus. Now the second order neurons are started. These second order neurons, they have seen all the tracts. All the tracts are crossed and they think that why don't we? Then they crossed. So they crossed to the opposite side as internal arcade fibers. They crosses to the opposite side as internal arcade fibers. Then they ascends up as medial lemniscus. In case of these two tracts, anterior spinothalamic tract and lateral spinothalamic tract. When they are passing through the brainstem, this bundle what we call spinal lemniscus. And here internal arcuate fibers after crossing the midline, when they are ascending up in the brainstem, this bundle what we call medial lemniscus. Medial lemniscus. Now they ascends up and they reaches to the same nucleus of thalamus. What is that nucleus? Ventral posterior lateral nucleus. From here third order neurons will start. Third order neurons from here they reaches to the area number 312. So here they reaches to the area number 312, somatic sensory area. If you observe in the opposite side also, here also gracile nucleus and here also cuneate nucleus. Second order neurons from this nucleus they crosses like this and they ascends upward and they reaches here. What has happened here? There is decussation of sensory fibers. This decussation what we call sensory decussation. This decussation what we call sensory decussation. So this is about the dorsal column fibers. Otherwise fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus. Otherwise tract of goll and tract of Burdach. So let me repeat it. Receptors of fine touch, receptors of proprioception, receptors of kinesthetic sensation will be stimulated. That stimulus will be converted into the electrical impulses. Those impulses will be carried by the first order neurons which are present in the dorsal root ganglia, and central process of those neurons will be reaching to the posterior horn. They couldn't found any nucleus. All nuclei are engaged with those tracts. Then they ascends upward. That means first order neurons itself they ascends upward. This medial part is fasciculus gracilis and the lateral part is fasciculus cuneatus. In this area these tracts will ascends up and they reaches to the medulla oblongata. Within the medulla oblongata they have found gracile nucleus, cuneate nucleus. Within the gracile nucleus fasciculus gracilis will terminate. Within the cuneate nucleus fasciculus cuneatus will terminate. Then second order neurons will arise. Those second order neurons what we call internal arcuate fibers. Those internal arcuate fibers will crosses from one side to another side. Okay, they crosses the midline and they ascends upward as medial lemniscus and they reaches to the thalamus and terminates. That means second order neurons will terminate and third order neurons will start in the thalamus. They reaches to the area number 312. So here first order neurons. So this is only about the ascending tracts. Some other small tracts are there like spino-reticular tract. Second order neurons from the spinal cord they reaches to the reticular formation. So that is what we call spino-reticular. Spinotectal I have already told. Spino-vilivary from the spinal cord to the olivary nucleus. Right? But importantly you should know anterior and lateral spinothalamic tract, ventral and dorsal spinocerebellar tract, fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus.